Marcus stared at the bank statement in his trembling hands, watching 43 years of his life savings disappear with a single transaction. The joint account he had trusted Linda to manage showed a balance of $0.17. When he confronted her that evening, she laughed and said he was too stupid to understand money anyway. 3 months later, she discovered just how smart a stupid man could be when he wanted revenge. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Northwest Financial buzzed overhead as Marcus Chen sat across from the loan officer, his weathered hands folded on the mahogany desk. At 64, he had the calloused fingers of a man who had spent 4 decades building custom cabinets, each piece crafted with the precision that had earned him a reputation throughout Seattle's upscale neighborhoods. "Mr. Chen, I'm afraid there's been some confusion," the young loan officer said, his tie slightly askew as he reviewed the paperwork. "According to our records, you don't qualify for this business expansion loan. Your credit score has dropped significantly, and there are several missed payments on your existing accounts." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He had come to the bank to discuss expanding his woodworking shop, maybe hiring another craftsman to help with the growing demand for his custom furniture. The Seattle housing boom had created a surge in clients wanting bespoke pieces for their renovated homes, and Marcus had saved diligently for this moment. "That's impossible," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the confusion flooding his mind. "I've never missed a payment in my life. My wife Linda handles our finances, and she's meticulous about these things." The loan officer, whose nameplate read Kevin Martinez, pulled up another screen on his computer. His expression grew more uncomfortable as he scrolled through the information. "Sir, it shows here that your joint checking account was overdrawn 6 times in the past year, and there are outstanding balances on 4 credit cards totaling nearly $38,000. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. $38,000 in debt, overdrawn accounts. This couldn't be right. Linda had always assured him that their finances were solid, that his steady income from the cabinet shop, combined with her part-time work at the interior design firm, provided them with a comfortable middle-class life. "Could you print out these statements for me?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kevin hesitated. "Mr. Chen, I should mention that Mrs. Chen was here just last week. She applied for a personal line of credit using your joint assets as collateral. Given the current state of your accounts, we had to decline her application." The drive home through Seattle's afternoon traffic passed in a blur. Marcus gripped the steering wheel of his aging Ford pickup, the printed bank statements sitting on the passenger seat like evidence of a crime he didn't understand. The familiar route through the Ballard neighborhood, past the coffee shops and boutiques that Linda loved to browse, felt foreign and threatening. Their house sat on a quiet street lined with craftsman-style homes, the kind of neighborhood where families raised children and retired couples tended their gardens. Marcus had bought the house in 1987 with the down payment he had saved from his first 5 years as an independent contractor. The mortgage had been paid off for nearly a decade, or so he had believed. Linda's silver BMW sat in the driveway, the car she had insisted they needed when she started working with higher-end clients. At the time, Marcus had questioned the monthly payment, but Linda had convinced him it was an investment in her career, a way to project success to potential customers. Inside, the house smelled of the vanilla candles Linda burned constantly, an expensive habit that had always seemed harmless. She sat at the kitchen island, her laptop open, surrounded by fabric samples and paint chips. At 59, Linda maintained the polished appearance she had cultivated during her years as a flight attendant before they married and she transitioned to interior design. "How did the bank meeting go?" she asked, without looking up from her computer screen. Marcus placed the bank statements on the counter beside her laptop. "Linda, we need to talk." She glanced at the papers with annoyance. "Marcus, I'm trying to finish this proposal for the Morrison renovation. Can't this wait until after dinner?" "No, it can't wait." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat across from her. The bank says we're $38,000 in debt. They say our checking account has been overdrawn multiple times. They denied my loan application. Linda sighed dramatically and closed her laptop. Marcus, you don't understand how credit works. Those credit cards are for business expenses, tax-deductible purchases for my design projects. The overdraws were just timing issues when clients were late paying their invoices. But you never told me about any of this, Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. You said our finances were fine. You said we had savings. We do have savings, Linda snapped. Just because you can't understand the complexities of modern financial management doesn't mean there's a problem. I handle the money because you're too simple to understand investment strategies and business accounting. The words stung more than Marcus had expected. Throughout their marriage, Linda had gradually taken over all financial responsibilities, claiming she was better suited for such tasks. She had convinced him to sign over power of attorney for their accounts, arguing it would streamline their banking and bill paying. I want to see all the statements, Marcus said firmly. Every account, every credit card, everything. Linda's expression hardened. Marcus, you're being paranoid. I've managed our money for 20 years without any problems. Just because you had one bad day at the bank doesn't mean you need to micromanage everything I do. This isn't micromanaging. This is my money too. Our money. Your money? Linda laughed, a cold sound that echoed in the kitchen. Marcus, you build cabinets. You work with your hands. Financial planning requires intelligence, analytical thinking, skills you've never developed. Leave the complex decisions to someone who actually understands them. Marcus stared at his wife, seeing something in her expression he had never noticed before. Contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt for the man who had supported her for over 20 years. That night, Marcus lay awake listening to Linda's steady breathing beside him. The master bedroom felt different now, like a space he was sharing with a stranger. The furniture they had selected together, the artwork Linda had chosen for the walls, even the Egyptian cotton sheets she had insisted they needed, all of it felt tainted by the afternoon's revelations. Unable to sleep, Marcus slipped out of bed and made his way to his home office, a small room off the garage where he kept his business records and design sketches. The space smelled of wood shavings and the coffee he drank while planning his projects. This was his sanctuary, the only part of the house that felt entirely his. He powered up his old desktop computer and began searching through their joint accounts online. Linda had set up all the passwords, claiming it was easier for her to manage everything centrally. But Marcus remembered watching her type one of them months ago, and he had always been good with details. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The first account he accessed made his stomach drop. Their joint savings, which Linda had told him contained over $40,000, showed a balance of $312. The transaction history revealed a pattern of large withdrawals over the past 2 years, money transferred to accounts he didn't recognize. The checking account was worse. Overdraft fees appeared monthly, sometimes multiple times per month. Automatic payments for credit cards he had never authorized, cash advances that had been taken against their home equity line of credit, a loan he didn't remember signing for. Marcus spent the next 3 hours documenting what he found. 4 credit cards maxed out to their limits, a second mortgage on their home that he had never seen paperwork for, investment accounts that showed massive losses, his retirement savings apparently gambled away on high-risk stock options. By dawn, the scope of the financial devastation was clear. They were not just $38,000 in debt. The actual number was closer to $140,000, and their house was being used as collateral for debts he had never authorized. Marcus printed everything he could access, creating a folder of evidence that painted a picture of systematic financial fraud. Linda had been forging his signature on loan documents, opening credit cards in his name, and using his business income to support a lifestyle far beyond their means.
The morning sun was filtering through the office window when Linda appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work in one of her expensive business suits. "You were up all night," she observed, noting the printed documents scattered across his desk. "Linda, we need to go to a financial advisor together, today. We need to understand exactly what our situation is and how to fix it." She walked over to the desk and glanced at the bank statements. "Marcus, you're obsessing over numbers you don't understand. I told you yesterday, everything is under control." "This says we owe $140,000, Marcus said, holding up a summary sheet he had created. "This says there's a lien against our house that I never signed for." Linda's composure cracked slightly. "Those are business investments, Marcus. Short-term debt that will pay off when my design projects start generating serious income. You wouldn't understand the cash flow requirements of a growing business." "Then explain it to me," Marcus said, standing up from his chair. "Show me the business plan. Show me the contracts with these clients who are going to pay off $140,000 in debt." "I don't have time for this," Linda said, turning toward the door. "I have a client meeting in an hour, and then I'm having lunch with Rebecca to discuss the Northgate project. We'll talk about this tonight." "No," Marcus said, his voice firmer than it had been in years. "We'll talk about this now. Cancel your meetings." Linda spun around, her face flushed with anger. "Cancel my meetings? Marcus, do you have any idea how hard I've worked to build my client base? Do you think custom cabinets are going to pay for our retirement? My design business is our future, and I'm not going to let your paranoid financial anxiety destroy everything I've built." "You've destroyed everything we built," Marcus said quietly. "You've stolen from me, Linda. You forged my signature and gambled away my life savings." The accusation hung in the air between them. For a moment, Linda's mask slipped completely, and Marcus saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. "Stolen from you?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Marcus, everything we have came from both of us working together. Just because you're too stupid to understand modern financial strategies doesn't mean I've done anything wrong." "Too stupid," Marcus repeated. "That's what you really think of me, isn't it?" "I think you're a good man who works hard with his hands," Linda said, her tone becoming patronizing. "But financial planning requires education, sophistication, intellectual capabilities that you've never developed. It's not your fault, Marcus. Some people are just better suited for different things." Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him as he listened to his wife's words. For 20 years, he had deferred to her judgment on financial matters, trusting her education and assumed expertise. He had accepted her condescending explanations when he questioned certain expenses, believing that his lack of a college degree made him less qualified to understand complex financial decisions. "Get out," he said softly. "What?" "Get out of my office. Go to your meetings. But Linda, understand this. I'm going to figure out exactly what you've done, and I'm going to fix it." Linda's expression shifted from anger to something that might have been fear. "Marcus, you're overreacting. Let me handle this situation like I always do." "The way you've been handling it is the reason we're in this situation. From now on, I handle my own money." After Linda left for work, Marcus sat in his office surrounded by the evidence of his financial ruin. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock Linda had bought without consulting him, another expensive purchase that had seemed reasonable at the time. He thought about the years of working 12-hour days to build his cabinet business, the pride he had taken in his craftsmanship, the satisfaction of seeing his custom pieces installed in beautiful homes throughout the Pacific Northwest. All of that work, all of those years of careful saving and conservative spending had been systematically undermined by the woman he had trusted most. Marcus picked up the phone and called his accountant, a practical man named Robert Tanaka, who had been handling his business taxes for 15 years. "Robert, it's Marcus Chen. I need to understand something about my personal finances, and I think I'm going to need help." The conversation with Robert lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, Marcus understood that his situation was even worse than he had initially calculated. Linda had been using their joint tax returns to justify business losses that didn't exist, claiming deductions for expenses that appeared to be personal purchases disguised as professional investments. "Marcus, what your wife has done could be considered financial fraud. The forged signatures alone are enough to press criminal charges. Have you considered consulting with an attorney?" Marcus never imagined he would need a lawyer for anything related to his marriage. He had always seen attorneys as people who handled other people's problems, not his own. But as he sat in his office, looking at the documentation of Linda's deception, he realized that his old assumptions about trust and partnership had been dangerously naive. The law firm of Peterson, Williams, and Associates occupied 3 floors of a downtown Seattle high-rise, the kind of building that Linda liked to have her business lunches. Marcus felt out of place in the marble lobby, wearing his best pair of khakis and a button-down shirt that Linda always criticized as too casual for professional settings. Attorney Jennifer Williams was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 40s, with a sharp appearance of someone who spent her days dealing with complicated financial disputes. Her office overlooked Elliott Bay, and Marcus found himself momentarily distracted by the view of ferries moving across the gray water. "Mr. Chen, I've reviewed the documents you provided, and I have to say, this is one of the more comprehensive cases of spousal financial abuse I've encountered. Your wife has essentially been running a parallel financial life using your credit and assets as collateral."
"What are my options?" Marcus asked. "Several," Jennifer replied, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "We could pursue criminal charges for the forged signatures and unauthorized use of your credit. We could file for divorce with a focus on financial fraud and asset recovery. Or we could try to work with your wife to restructure the debt and create a repayment plan." Marcus thought about Linda's words from that morning. Too stupid to understand modern financial strategies. The patronizing tone she had used when dismissing his concerns about their debt. "What would you recommend?" he asked. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus with the analytical gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating complex human motivations. "Mr. Chen, in my experience, people who commit this level of financial fraud don't typically reform through conversation and therapy. Your wife has been systematically deceiving you for years, forging your signature and gambling with your retirement security. This isn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This is a pattern of deliberate criminal behavior." "But we've been married for 20 years, Marcus said. "Shouldn't I try to save the marriage first?" "That's a decision only you can make," Jennifer replied. "But I want you to understand something. Right now, your wife controls all of your joint assets. Every day that passes is another day she could potentially drain more of your accounts or take on additional debt in your name. If you're serious about protecting yourself financially, time is not on your side." Marcus left the law office with Jennifer's business card and a recommendation to think carefully about his next steps. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a descent into a different version of his life, one where his marriage was a legal liability rather than a partnership. Downtown Seattle bustled with afternoon activity. Office workers hurried along the sidewalks, many of them probably heading home to spouses they trusted, to houses they owned without massive hidden debt, to retirement accounts that hadn't been secretly liquidated. Marcus envied their normalcy, their ability to assume that the people closest to them were honest and trustworthy. Instead of driving directly home, Marcus stopped at his workshop. The converted warehouse space in the Georgetown neighborhood had been his professional sanctuary for 12 years, filled with the tools and machinery he had accumulated over decades of cabinet making. The smell of sawdust and wood stain grounded him in a way that nothing else could. His current project was a built-in entertainment center for a young couple in Capitol Hill, custom designed to fit the unique angles of their 1920s bungalow. The cherry wood had been carefully selected for its grain pattern, and Marcus had spent weeks planning the joinery to ensure the piece would last for generations. Working with his hands had always been Marcus's way of processing complicated emotions. The precision required for fine woodworking demanded complete attention, leaving no mental space for anxiety or overthinking. As he adjusted the router settings for the detailed molding work, his mind began to clear. Linda had been right about one thing. Marcus was better suited for hands-on work than financial planning. But she had been wrong about what that meant. His success as a cabinet maker required intelligence, analytical thinking, and the ability to solve complex problems. The same skills that allowed him to visualize a custom piece of furniture and execute it flawlessly could be applied to understanding financial statements and legal strategies. By the time Marcus looked up from his work, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the workshop floor. He had spent 3 hours focused on the entertainment center, and in that time, his perspective on his situation had shifted dramatically. Linda had called him too stupid to understand money. But Marcus was beginning to understand that he wasn't stupid at all. He had been trusting, he had been generous, he had been willing to defer to someone else's supposed expertise rather than questioning decisions that affected his own financial security. The difference between stupidity and misplaced trust was significant, and Marcus was ready to demonstrate just how intelligent a supposedly stupid man could be when properly motivated. Marcus arrived home that evening to find Linda in the kitchen, preparing what appeared to be an elaborate dinner. Candles flickered on the dining room table, and she had opened a bottle of wine that he recognized as expensive from the import store she frequented. "I thought we should have a nice dinner together," she said, smiling in a way that seemed forced. "I made your favorite, salmon with that garlic herb crust you like." Marcus set his keys on the counter and studied his wife's face. "Did you have a good day at work?" "Very productive," Linda replied, stirring something on the stove. "The Morrison project is moving forward, and I think I'm close to landing the Bellevue condo development as a client. That could be a 6-figure contract, Marcus. Our financial situation could improve dramatically." "Our financial situation?" Marcus repeated. "Linda, I spent the day reviewing every account we have access to. I also spoke with an attorney." Linda's stirring motion slowed, but she didn't turn around. "An attorney? Marcus, that seems extreme. We're married. We can work through any financial disagreements together." "Financial disagreements?" Marcus said. "Is that what you call forging my signature on loan documents?" The wooden spoon clattered against the pot as Linda finally turned to face him. Her composure had cracked again, and Marcus could see the calculation behind her eyes as she decided how to respond. "Marcus, I've never forged your signature on anything," she said, her voice taking on the patient tone she used when explaining things she considered too complex for him to understand. "You signed all of those documents. You just don't remember, like always." "Show me," Marcus said. "Show me the original documents with my signature." "I don't keep hard copies of everything," Linda replied. "Most banking is digital now. You really don't understand how modern financial management works." Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the voice recording app he had downloaded that afternoon. Jennifer Williams had suggested documenting any conversations about the financial fraud in case Linda made admissions that could be useful in legal proceedings. "Linda, I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say," Marcus said. "I never signed documents for a second mortgage on our house. I never authorized the opening of 4 credit cards in my name. I never approved the liquidation of my retirement accounts to fund your business ventures." Linda stared at the phone, her face pale. "Marcus, you can't record me without my consent. That's illegal." "Actually, Washington is a one-party consent state," Marcus replied. "I can record any conversation I'm participating in." "Turn that off," Linda said, her voice rising. "This is ridiculous. We're married. We're supposed to trust each other." "Trust?" Marcus said.
That's interesting coming from someone who has been lying to me about our finances for years. Linda's carefully constructed persona finally collapsed completely. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp and angry. "You want the truth? Yes, I used your signature on some documents. Yes, I made financial decisions without consulting you. But everything I did was for our future, Marcus. My business has potential that you're too narrow-minded to see." "There it is," Marcus said, still holding the recording phone. "You've been committing fraud for years, and you're justifying it by claiming I'm too stupid to understand your grand plan." "Not stupid," Linda said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Limited. You think small, Marcus. You always have. You're content to build cabinets for middle-class clients while I'm trying to position us for real wealth." "Real wealth?" Marcus repeated. "Linda, you've destroyed our actual wealth. You've turned our paid-off house into collateral for loans we can't afford. You've maxed out credit cards to fund a business that has generated exactly zero profit in 3 years. You don't understand the timeline for building a luxury design business, Linda snapped. High-end clients expect a certain level of presentation, a certain lifestyle. Those investments will pay off. When? Marcus asked, because according to the bank statements, your business has been operating at a loss since the day you started it. Every project costs more than it generates. Every client meeting requires expensive lunches and equipment purchases that somehow never result in actual income. Linda's face flushed with anger and something that might have been embarrassment. I'm building relationships, Marcus. I'm establishing credibility in a competitive market. You wouldn't understand the subtleties of client development because you've never worked in a sophisticated business environment. Marcus looked at his wife, really looked at her, and realized that she genuinely believed her own justifications. In her mind, she was a visionary entrepreneur temporarily constrained by her husband's pedestrian understanding of business strategy. The massive debt wasn't evidence of failure, it was the necessary cost of eventual success. Linda, Marcus said, turning off the recording, I want you to leave. Leave? She repeated as if the word didn't make sense. Pack some clothes and stay somewhere else tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with a financial counselor and an attorney, and we're going to figure out how to clean up this mess. This is my house too, Linda said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. You can't just throw me out. Actually, I can, Marcus replied. The house title is in my name only. I bought it 5 years before we met, and I never added your name to the deed. This was the first piece of genuinely good news Marcus had discovered in his financial investigation. For reasons he couldn't remember, probably related to some long-forgotten tax strategy Linda had recommended, they had never transferred the house into joint ownership. You're being unreasonable, Linda said, but Marcus could see the fear creeping into her expression. We can work this out together like we always do. The way we've always worked things out is that you make decisions and I pay for them. That arrangement is over. Linda tried several more approaches that evening. She offered to take a second job to help pay down the debt. She promised to be more transparent about business expenses. She suggested marriage counseling to address their communication problems. Each suggestion was presented as if their financial crisis was a mutual misunderstanding rather than a systematic campaign of fraud and deception. Marcus listened to each proposal with the same calm attention he gave to clients who wanted to make changes to custom furniture designs after construction had already begun. Theoretically possible, but not without tearing apart all the work that had already been completed. Linda, Marcus said, turning off the recording, I want you to leave. Leave? She repeated, as if the word didn't make sense. Pack some clothes and stay somewhere else tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with a financial counselor and an attorney, and we're going to figure out how to clean up this mess. This is my house too, Linda said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. You can't just throw me out. Actually, I can, Marcus replied. The house title is in my name only. I bought it 5 years before we met, and I never added your name to the deed. This was the first piece of genuinely good news Marcus had discovered in his financial investigation. For reasons he couldn't remember, probably related to some long-forgotten tax strategy Linda had recommended, they had never transferred the house into joint ownership. You're being unreasonable, Linda said, but Marcus could see the fear creeping into her expression. We can work this out together like we always do. The way we've always worked things out is that you make decisions and I pay for them. That arrangement is over. Linda tried several more approaches that evening. She offered to take a second job to help pay down the debt. She promised to be more transparent about business expenses. She suggested marriage counseling to address their communication problems. Each suggestion was presented as if their financial crisis was a mutual misunderstanding rather than a systematic campaign of fraud and deception. Marcus listened to each proposal with the same calm attention he gave to clients who wanted to make changes to custom furniture designs after construction had already begun. Theoretically possible, but not without tearing apart all the work that had already been completed. Linda, Marcus said, turning off the recording, I want you to leave. Leave? She repeated, as if the word didn't make sense. Pack some clothes and stay somewhere else tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with a financial counselor and an attorney, and we're going to figure out how to clean up this mess. This is my house too, Linda said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. You can't just throw me out. Actually, I can, Marcus replied. The house title is in my name only. I bought it 5 years before we met, and I never added your name to the deed. This was the first piece of genuinely good news Marcus had discovered in his financial investigation. For reasons he couldn't remember, probably related to some long-forgotten tax strategy Linda had recommended, they had never transferred the house into joint ownership. "You're being unreasonable," Linda said, but Marcus could see the fear creeping into her expression. "We can work this out together like we always do. The way we've always worked things out is that you make decisions and I pay for them. That arrangement is over." Linda tried several more approaches that evening. She offered to take a second job to help pay down the debt. She promised to be more transparent about business expenses. She suggested marriage counseling to address their communication problems. Each suggestion was presented as if their financial crisis was a mutual misunderstanding rather than a systematic campaign of fraud and deception. Marcus listened to each proposal with the same calm attention he gave to clients who wanted to make changes to custom furniture designs after construction had already begun. Theoretically possible, but not without tearing apart all the work that had already been completed. "Linda," Marcus said, turning off the recording, "I want you to leave." "Leave?" she repeated, as if the word didn't make sense. "Pack some clothes and stay somewhere else tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with a financial counselor and an attorney, and we're going to figure out how to clean up this mess." "This is my house too," Linda said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "You can't just throw me out." "Actually, I can," Marcus replied. "The house title is in my name only. I bought it 5 years before we met, and I never added your name to the deed." This was the first piece of genuinely good news Marcus had discovered in his financial investigation. For reasons he couldn't remember, probably related to some long-forgotten tax strategy Linda had recommended, they had never transferred the house into joint ownership. "You're being unreasonable," Linda said, but Marcus could see the fear creeping into her expression. "We can work this out together like we always do. The way we've always worked things out is that you make decisions and I pay for them. That arrangement is over." Linda tried several more approaches that evening. She offered to take a second job to help pay down the debt. She promised to be more transparent about business expenses. She suggested marriage counseling to address their communication problems. Each suggestion was presented as if their financial crisis was a mutual misunderstanding rather than a systematic campaign of fraud and deception. Marcus listened to each proposal with the same calm attention he gave to clients who wanted to make changes to custom furniture designs after construction had already begun. Theoretically possible, but not without tearing apart all the work that had already been completed. "Linda," Marcus said, turning off the recording, "I want you to leave." "Leave?" she repeated, as if the word didn't make sense. "Pack some clothes and stay somewhere else tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with a financial counselor and an attorney, and we're going to figure out how to clean up this mess." "This is my house too," Linda said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "You can't just throw me out." "Actually, I can," Marcus replied. "The house title is in my name only. I bought it 5 years before we met, and I never added your name to the deed." This was the first piece of genuinely good news Marcus had discovered in his financial investigation. For reasons he couldn't remember, probably related to some long-forgotten tax strategy Linda had recommended, they had never transferred the house into joint ownership. "You're being unreasonable," Linda said, but Marcus could see the fear creeping into her expression. "We can work this out together like we always do. The way we've always worked things out is that you make decisions and I pay for them. That arrangement is over." Linda tried several more approaches that evening. She offered to take a second job to help pay down the debt. She promised to be more transparent about business expenses. She suggested marriage counseling
The interest rate would be lower than what you're paying on these credit cards. How much could I borrow? Against your business assets? Probably $60,000. That would cover the high-interest credit card debt and give you some working capital to stabilize your cash flow. Marcus thought about Linda's reaction when she discovered he had cut off her access to their joint accounts. She would be angry, probably desperate. People in desperate situations made poor decisions, and poor decisions created opportunities for those prepared to take advantage of them. "Frank, I want to do something unconventional," Marcus said. "I want to set up a financial trap." Frank raised an eyebrows. "A trap?" "I want to create a situation where Linda thinks she has access to money that she actually doesn't have access to. I want to document her attempting to commit additional fraud." "Marcus, that sounds legally complicated. Are you working with an attorney?" "I am," Marcus replied, "and she thinks this is a smart strategy." The plan Jennifer Williams had outlined was elegant in its simplicity. They would establish a new joint checking account with a modest balance, perhaps $5,000. Marcus would inform Linda about the account, claiming it was money he had set aside for emergency expenses. When Linda inevitably attempted to access the funds without authorization, her actions would be recorded by the bank's security systems, providing additional evidence of her willingness to commit financial fraud. "It's called a controlled environment for documenting criminal behavior," Jennifer had explained. "We're giving your wife an opportunity to demonstrate her intentions in a situation where the financial damage is limited and the evidence is clear." Marcus understood the psychological aspects of the trap as well. Linda had become accustomed to having unlimited access to his money, and the sudden restriction of that access would create pressure for her to seek alternative sources of funds. The emergency account would appear to be exactly the kind of opportunity she had been exploiting for years. By the end of the week, Marcus had restructured his entire financial life. New bank accounts, a business loan to consolidate the high-interest debt, and a carefully monitored joint account that would serve as bait for Linda's next act of theft. He had also changed all the passwords on their shared accounts and arranged for statements to be mailed to a post office box rather than their home address. For the first time in 20 years, Marcus had complete control over his own financial information. Linda called every day, usually in the evening when she knew he would be home from the workshop. The conversations followed a predictable pattern. She would ask when she could come home, express frustration about staying with her sister, and suggest various compromises that would allow them to reconcile without addressing the fundamental issue of her financial fraud. "Marcus, Rebecca is getting tired of having a house guest," Linda said during Thursday evening's call. "I need to come home and get more of my things." "You can come by on Saturday afternoon," Marcus replied. "I'll be here to let you in." "I have my own key, Marcus. This is still my home." "I had the locks changed," Marcus said. "And Linda, when you come on Saturday, we need to discuss how you're going to start paying back the money you stole." "I didn't steal anything," Linda protested, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier in the week. "Everything I spent was for legitimate business purposes." "Bring receipts," Marcus said. "Bring documentation for every business expense you charge to our joint accounts. We'll go through them together." Saturday afternoon arrived gray and drizzly, typical October weather in Seattle. Marcus had spent the morning organizing Linda's belongings, packing her clothes and personal items into boxes and suitcases. He wanted their conversation to be focused on financial issues rather than domestic logistics. Linda arrived driving a car Marcus didn't recognize, a newer model Toyota that was obviously a rental. Her BMW was probably being repossessed, another consequence of the debt crisis she had created. "New car?" Marcus asked as she approached the front door. "The BMW is in the shop," Linda replied, but her expression suggested this wasn't entirely true. Inside, Linda surveyed the boxes Marcus had prepared with obvious displeasure. "You're really serious about this separation." "I'm serious about understanding what you've done with our money," Marcus said. Linda set her purse on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "Marcus, I'm not going to justify every business expense to you like you're my accountant. I'm a professional designer. I make professional decisions about my business investments." "Your business investments," Marcus repeated. "Linda, show me one client who has paid you more than you spent acquiring them. Show me one project that generated a profit." "Profit isn't the only measure of business success," Linda said, her voice taking on the defensive tone Marcus had learned to recognize. I'm building brand recognition, establishing market position, creating long-term value. With my money, Marcus said, money you took without permission using forged signatures. Linda's carefully maintained composure cracked again. Fine, you want specifics? I spent $8,000 on that Morrison project alone. Premium materials, custom fixtures, contractor consultations. When they see the finished result, it's going to generate referrals worth 10 times that investment. Show me the contract, Marcus said. Show me documentation of this $8,000 project. Linda hesitated, and Marcus realized she couldn't produce a contract because the Morrison project existed primarily in her imagination. She had been spending money on expensive materials and business lunches while calling it client development, but the actual paying clients were largely fictional. I don't carry contracts with me, Linda said eventually. They're in my business files. Then let's go get them, Marcus suggested. Right now. Let's drive to wherever you keep your business files and review your client contracts. That's not convenient today, Linda replied. I have a client consultation this evening. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the voice recording app. Linda, for the record, are you telling me that you can't provide documentation for the business expenses you charge to our joint accounts? Stop recording me, Linda said, her voice rising. This is harassment. This is accountability, Marcus corrected, something you've been avoiding for 3 years. The conversation deteriorated from there. Linda accused Marcus of being controlling and vindictive. Marcus documented her inability to provide evidence for any of her claimed business expenses.
By the time she loaded her belongings into the rental car, both of them understood that their marriage was over in all but legal technicalities. I'll be in touch through my attorney, Linda said as she prepared to leave. You have an attorney? Marcus asked. I will, Linda replied. Someone who understands community property law and women's rights in divorce proceedings. Marcus watched his wife drive away for the second time in a week, but this departure felt different, final. The woman who had shared his bed for 20 years was now explicitly positioning herself as his legal adversary, someone who would use the court system to continue exploiting his financial resources. That evening, Marcus called Jennifer Williams at her home number, a privilege she had granted to clients dealing with ongoing fraud situations. She took the bait, he reported. Linda can't provide. Marcus spent Monday morning at his workshop, but his mind wasn't on the entertainment center project. Instead, he found himself sketching financial flowcharts on the back of wood grain samples, mapping out the pattern of Linda's deception with the same methodical precision he applied to complex joinery work. The phone call came at 11:30, just as Marcus was preparing to leave for his lunch meeting with Jennifer Williams. The caller ID showed Northwest Financial, the same bank where his loan application had been denied 2 weeks earlier. Mr. Chen, this is Kevin Martinez from Northwest Financial. I have some unusual activity to report on one of your accounts. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Which account? The joint emergency account you opened last week. There was an attempted withdrawal this morning for $4,000. The transaction was declined because it required dual authorization, but I thought you should know that someone tried to access the funds using Mrs. Chen's debit card. Perfect. Marcus had been waiting for exactly this call. Kevin, I need you to document everything about that attempted transaction. Time, location, security camera footage if available. Can you email me a detailed report? Of course, sir. Should I cancel Mrs. Chen's access to the account? Not yet, Marcus said, but I want to be notified immediately if there are any other attempted transactions. The trap was working exactly as Jennifer Williams had predicted. Linda had discovered the emergency account within days of its creation, probably by accessing their joint mail when she came to collect her belongings. Her attempt to withdraw $4,000 without authorization provided clear evidence of her ongoing willingness to commit financial fraud. Marcus arrived at Jennifer's office 15 minutes early, using the extra time to organize his thoughts and review the evidence he had compiled over the past week. The attorney's receptionist offered him coffee, but Marcus declined. His nervous energy needed no additional stimulation. Excellent work, Jennifer said as she reviewed the bank report from Kevin Martinez.
This gives us a clear pattern of unauthorized access attempts. Combined with the forged signatures and the financial statements you've gathered, we have a very strong case for both criminal charges and civil asset recovery. What happens next? Marcus asked. Jennifer opened a thick legal folder and pulled out several sets of documents. We have 3 parallel tracks we can pursue. First, we file criminal complaints for financial fraud and identity theft. The bank's security footage and transaction records provide clear evidence of unauthorized access attempts. She handed Marcus the first set of papers. Second, we file for divorce with a focus on asset recovery and financial restitution. We'll argue that your wife's fraudulent activities constitute grounds for an unequal division of any remaining marital assets. The second stack of documents was thicker, filled with legal terminology that Marcus didn't entirely understand but recognized as the formal end of his marriage. Third, and this is where things get interesting, Jennifer continued, we establish a financial monitoring system that will allow us to track any additional fraudulent activity while the legal proceedings move forward. Financial monitoring? Jennifer smiled, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the strategic thinking that had made her successful in complex litigation cases. Your wife doesn't know that you've discovered the full extent of her fraud. She's going to continue trying to access money, probably becoming more desperate as her current resources run out. We're going to document every attempt. The plan was sophisticated in its simplicity. Marcus would maintain the appearance of normal financial activity while actually monitoring and recording Linda's behavior through a network of controlled accounts and credit monitoring services. Every attempted transaction, every credit application, every effort to access funds would be documented and added to the growing evidence file. How long will this take? Marcus asked. Criminal charges can be filed within 30 days, Jennifer replied. The divorce proceedings will take longer, probably 6 to 8 months, depending on how aggressively your wife's attorney fights the asset division. But Marcus, I want you to understand something important. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Your wife is going to escalate her behavior when she realizes she's being legally pursued. People who commit financial fraud don't typically admit guilt and accept responsibility. They usually become more desperate and more willing to take risks. What kind of risks? Identity theft, credit fraud, potentially even attempts to forge your signature on larger financial instruments like property transfers or business loans. We need to be prepared for her to become significantly more aggressive in her criminal behavior. Marcus left Jennifer's office with a comprehensive legal strategy and a timeline for filing both criminal and civil proceedings. The afternoon felt different as he drove back toward his workshop, charged with the energy of someone who had moved from defensive reactions to offensive planning. His phone buzzed with a text message as he stopped at a red light. Linda's name appeared on the screen, and Marcus felt a familiar knot of tension in his stomach. But when he read the message, his anxiety transformed into something closer to anticipation. Marcus, we need to talk. I have a proposal that could solve all our financial problems. Meet me at Northgate Mall food court at 7 p.m. tonight. This could change everything. Marcus forwarded the message to Jennifer Williams with a brief note asking for advice about the meeting. Her response came within minutes. Go to the meeting, but record everything. This sounds like she's about to make admissions or proposals that could be useful in court. Stay calm, don't make any commitments, and document whatever she suggests. The Northgate Mall food court buzzed with typical Monday evening activity. Families finishing dinner, teenagers gathering after school, elderly couples sharing coffee and conversation. Marcus arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table with clear sightlines and minimal background noise, positioning his phone to record their conversation without being obvious about it. Linda appeared exactly on time, walking with the purposeful stride Marcus remembered from her flight attendant days. She had dressed professionally, wearing one of her expensive business suits and carrying the leather portfolio she used for client meetings. But Marcus noticed details that suggested financial stress. Her shoes were scuffed, her jewelry was less elaborate than usual, and the portfolio looked worn around the edges. "Thank you for coming," Linda said as she sat across from him.
I know things have been tense between us, but I think I've found a solution that works for everyone. Marcus nodded but didn't speak, following Jennifer's advice to let Linda control the conversation and reveal her intentions. I've been thinking about our situation, Linda continued, and I realize I made some mistakes in how I handled our finances. But Marcus, I've also been working on something that could make all of this debt irrelevant. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a folder thick with marketing materials and business plans. I've been in negotiations with a developer who wants to hire me as the primary interior designer for a luxury condominium project in Bellevue. The contract value is $150,000, Marcus, enough to pay off all our debts and still have money left over for your retirement account. Marcus examined the materials Linda had provided: glossy brochures for a development called Cascade Heights, architectural renderings of expensive condominiums, and what appeared to be a preliminary contract with Linda's name listed as the interior design consultant. "This looks impressive," Marcus said carefully. "When does the project start?" "That's what I need to discuss with you," Linda replied, her voice taking on the enthusiastic tone she used when presenting her business ideas. "The developer requires a performance bond before they'll finalize the contract, $25,000 as a guarantee that I can complete the work on schedule." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. A performance bond. "It's standard practice in large commercial projects," Linda explained. "The bond gets returned when the work is completed, plus I receive the full contract payment. It's essentially a short-term loan that generates a 6-to-1 return on investment." "And you need $25,000 to secure this contract?" "Right," Linda said, leaning forward with obvious excitement. "Marcus, this is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been building toward. This contract will establish me as a major player in the luxury design market. The referrals alone could generate hundreds of thousands in future business." Marcus studied his wife's face, noting the genuine enthusiasm in her expression. She seemed to believe completely in the opportunity she was describing, which made her request more disturbing rather than less. This wasn't a conscious attempt to deceive him. It was evidence that Linda had lost the ability to distinguish between legitimate business opportunities and elaborate fantasies. "Linda, where would this $25,000 come from?" Marcus asked. "We could take out a short-term loan against the house," Linda suggested. "With your business income and the equity we have, any bank would approve a home equity line of credit for that amount." "We already have a home equity line of credit," Marcus said. "You maxed it out last year." Linda's enthusiasm faltered slightly. "We could increase the credit limit, or maybe take out a business loan against your workshop equipment." Marcus realized that Linda had no idea he had already restructured their debt and secured their remaining assets. In her mind, they still had access to credit and equity that could be used to fund her increasingly desperate business schemes. "Linda, I want you to think carefully about what you're asking me," Marcus said, activating the recording app on his phone. "You want me to put our house at additional risk to fund a business venture for someone who has already accumulated over $100,000 in debt through similar projects." "This is different," Linda insists. "This is a guaranteed contract with an established developer. The risk is minimal compared to the potential return." "Show me the developer's credentials," Marcus said. "Show me their financial statements, their track record of completed projects, their business license information." Linda hesitated, and Marcus saw uncertainty flicker across her face. "I have all of that information in my business files. I didn't bring everything with me tonight because I wanted to gauge your interest first." "Linda, I need to tell you something," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "I've spent the past 2 weeks investigating our financial situation with professional help. I know about the forged signatures, the unauthorized credit cards, and the fake business expenses." The blood drained from Linda's face. "Marcus, I can explain all of that."
I also know about your attempt to withdraw $4,000 from our emergency account without authorization, Marcus continued. The bank has security footage and transaction records. Linda stared at him for a long moment, her professional composure completely gone. You set me up. I documented your behavior, Marcus corrected. Linda, you've been committing financial fraud for years. The evidence is overwhelming, and I've already consulted with an attorney about filing criminal charges. Criminal charges? Linda's voice rose, causing several other food court patrons to glance in their direction. Marcus, I'm your wife. Everything I did was for our joint benefit. Everything you did was theft, Marcus said quietly. You stole my retirement savings, you forged my signature on loan documents, and you used my credit to fund a lifestyle we couldn't afford. Linda's expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, anger, fear, and finally a cold calculation that Marcus had never seen before. You think you're so smart, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think you figured everything out with your little investigation and your attorney meetings, but Marcus, you have no idea what you're dealing with. Then explain it to me, Marcus said, still recording their conversation. Community property law, Linda replied. Regardless of what you think I've done, we've been married for 20 years. Half of everything you own belongs to me. Your workshop, your house, your business income, all of it is marital property. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. In her growing desperation, Linda was revealing the depth of her sense of entitlement to his assets. Linda, even if that were true, you can't steal community property through fraud and forgery, Marcus said. Criminal behavior doesn't become legal just because you're married to your victim. Victim? Linda laughed bitterly. Marcus, you benefited from every business decision I made. You lived in the nice house, you drove the nice cars, you enjoyed the lifestyle my investments created. What lifestyle? Marcus asked. Linda, we're buried in debt. Our retirement savings are gone. We owe more money than I can earn in 3 years. Short-term debt for long-term gain, Linda insists. You're too conservative to understand investment strategy, but that doesn't mean my decisions were wrong. Marcus looked at his wife and realized that she genuinely couldn't comprehend the destruction she had caused. In her mind, the massive debt was a temporary inconvenience. The forged signatures were administrative shortcuts, and the stolen money was strategic investment capital. Linda, the Cascade Heights project, Marcus said. Is it real?
Of course it's real, Linda replied immediately. I've been in negotiations with them for months. Then you won't mind if I call them tomorrow to verify the contract details. Linda's confidence wavered again. Marcus, that would be unprofessional. You can't interfere with my business relationships. Give me their phone number, Marcus said, right now. If this is a legitimate opportunity, they'll be happy to confirm the details with your husband. I don't have their number with me, Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus pulled out his phone and searched for Cascade Heights Bellevue Development. The search returned several results for luxury condominium projects in the area, but none matched the specific development Linda had described. Linda, there's no Cascade Heights project in Bellevue, Marcus said, showing her his search results. The marketing materials you showed me appear to be fabricated. You're not searching correctly, Linda protested. It's a new development, probably not listed in public databases yet. Marcus felt a mixture of sadness and anger as he realized the extent of Linda's delusion. She had created an elaborate fantasy about a non-existent business opportunity, complete with fake marketing materials and imaginary contracts, all to justify asking him for another $25,000. Linda, I want you to listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, his voice calm but resolute. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing for divorce. I'm also filing criminal charges for financial fraud, identity theft, and forgery. You can't do that, Linda said, her voice rising again. I'm your wife. We can work through this.
"You stole from me," Marcus repeated. "You've been systematically stealing from me for years, and tonight you try to convince me to give you $25,000 more for a project that doesn't exist." Linda stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her calculating her options. When she spoke again, her tone had changed completely. "Marcus, if you file criminal charges against me, I'll make sure you lose everything in the divorce," she said. "I know things about your business that could cause serious problems with tax authorities. Cash payments you've received that weren't properly reported, materials you've used for personal projects and written off as business expenses." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Some of Linda's accusations were true. He had occasionally accepted cash payments from small clients, and he had used business materials for personal projects around their house. Nothing dramatic, but potentially problematic if scrutinized by tax investigators. "Linda, are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining the consequences of your actions," Linda replied. "You want to destroy our marriage over some accounting disagreements? Fine, but understand that I won't go down alone." Marcus looked at his wife of 20 years and realized that he was seeing her true nature for the first time. The charming, sophisticated woman he had married was gone, replaced by someone who would use any available weapon to protect her access to his money. "I think we're done here," Marcus said, standing from the food court table. "Marcus, wait," Linda called as he began to walk away. "We don't have to be enemies. We can find a solution that works for everyone." Marcus turned back to face her one last time. "Linda, the solution is simple. You stop stealing from me, and I stop letting you." He left the mall with Linda's threats echoing in his mind, but also with a complete recording of their conversation. Jennifer Williams would be very interested in Linda's admission that she had fabricated the Cascade Heights project, and her threats about tax investigations could constitute witness intimidation. Tuesday morning brought a phone call that Marcus had been expecting but dreading. Linda's attorney introduced himself as David Patterson from Patterson Hayes and Associates, a firm Marcus recognized from their aggressive advertising on local television. "Mr. Chen, my client has informed me about the domestic dispute you're experiencing," Patterson said, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating people through legal proceedings. "I understand you've made some serious accusations against Mrs. Chen regarding financial improprieties." "Those aren't accusations," Marcus replied. "They're documented facts supported by bank records and security footage." "Mr. Chen, I want to suggest that you and Mrs. Chen attempt to resolve these issues through mediation rather than pursuing criminal charges. Divorce proceedings can become very unpleasant when one party tries to use the legal system for revenge." Marcus felt the implicit threat in the attorney's words. "Mr. Patterson, I'm represented by Jennifer Williams. I think all future communication should go through her office." "Of course," Patterson replied. "But Mr. Chen, before we escalate this situation, I want you to understand that my client has information about tax irregularities in your business that could result in significant penalties and interest charges from federal authorities." There it was, the threat Linda had made explicit. Marcus had expected this development, and Jennifer Williams had prepared him for it. "Mr. Patterson, if your client has evidence of tax violations, she should report them to the appropriate authorities. But using threats of tax investigations to discourage someone from reporting financial fraud could constitute obstruction of justice." "That's not what I'm suggesting," Patterson said quickly. "I'm simply pointing out that divorce proceedings often reveal financial information that both parties might prefer to keep private." "My attorney will contact your office this afternoon," Marcus said, ending the call. Marcus immediately called Jennifer Williams and reported the conversation with Patterson. Her response was swift and decisive. "They're trying to intimidate you into dropping the criminal charges," Jennifer said. "It's a common tactic when the evidence of financial fraud is overwhelming. But Marcus, their threats actually help our case." "How?" "David Patterson is essentially admitting that his client has been monitoring your business activities and collecting information she could use against you," Jennifer explained. "That's evidence of premeditation and ongoing criminal intent." Jennifer scheduled an emergency meeting for that afternoon to discuss strategy and prepare for what she expected would be an escalating campaign of legal intimidation from Linda's attorney. Marcus spent the morning in his workshop, focusing on the entertainment center project as a way to calm his mind before the afternoon's legal discussions. The precision required for the detailed molding work helped center his thoughts and reminded him that he possessed skills and intelligence that extended far beyond financial planning. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a text message from Linda. "Marcus, Patterson is pushing me toward aggressive tactics I don't want to use. Can we meet privately to discuss a reasonable settlement?" Marcus forwarded the message to Jennifer Williams and received an immediate response. "Don't respond yet. This could be an attempt to get you to make statements without your attorney present. Let me handle all communication from this point forward." The afternoon meeting at Jennifer's office included a new participant, a criminal attorney named Robert Chen, who specialized in financial fraud cases.
Chang reviewed the evidence Marcus had compiled with the methodical attention of someone who had prosecuted hundreds of similar cases. "This is an unusually well-documented case," Chang observed. "The bank records, the recorded conversations, and the security footage create a clear pattern of deliberate financial fraud. But I'm also concerned about the threats your wife has made regarding tax issues." "How serious are those threats?" Marcus asked. Chang exchanged a glance with Jennifer Williams before responding. "Any tax irregularities in your business could complicate the criminal fraud case. The defense attorney will argue that both parties were involved in questionable financial behavior, which could muddy the waters regarding your wife's criminal liability. What do you recommend?" "Full disclosure," Chang replied immediately. "We contact the IRS voluntarily, report any questionable business practices, and pay any penalties or back taxes that might be owed. It removes your wife's ability to use tax issues as leverage and demonstrates good faith cooperation with authorities." Marcus spent the next hour detailing every cash payment he had received and every business expense that might have been questionable. The total amount involved was relatively small, probably less than $3,000 in unreported income over 5 years. But Chang insisted on absolute transparency. "The key is getting ahead of the story," Chang explained. "If we self-report and pay any penalties, your wife can't use tax issues to claim that both parties were involved in financial crimes." Jennifer Williams outlined the timeline for filing both criminal and civil proceedings. "We'll file the criminal complaints Thursday morning, followed immediately by the divorce petition with asset recovery claims. I expect Linda's attorney to respond aggressively, probably with counter-allegations and demands for detailed financial discovery." "What does that mean for me practically?" Marcus asked. "It means the next few months are going to be difficult," Jennifer replied honestly. "Your wife is going to fight these charges using every available tactic. She'll try to portray herself as a victim of an abusive husband, claim that any financial irregularities were the result of your controlling behavior, and argue that she deserves a substantial portion of your assets regardless of her criminal actions." Marcus left the law office with a comprehensive legal strategy, but also with a realistic understanding of the emotional and financial costs involved in pursuing justice. Linda would not accept responsibility quietly, and her attorney appeared to be someone who specialized in aggressive tactics rather than reasonable negotiation. That evening, Marcus received a phone call from his neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who lived in the house adjacent to his own. "Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you, but there was a woman at your house this afternoon who seemed to be taking photographs," Mrs. Henderson said. "She told me she was from an insurance company, but something about her behavior seemed unusual." Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. "What kind of photographs?" "She was focused on your workshop area, taking pictures of the equipment through the windows. When I asked her about it, she said she was conducting a property assessment for insurance purposes." "Did she show you any identification?" "She had some kind of badge, but she left quickly when I started asking questions." "Marcus, is everything okay? I know Linda moved out recently, and now there are strangers taking pictures of your property." Marcus thanked Mrs. Henderson and immediately called Jennifer Williams despite the late hour. Her response was immediate and concerning. "They're building a case for substantial asset division in the divorce," Jennifer explained.
Linda's attorney is probably trying to establish the value of your workshop equipment and business assets. The insurance story was just a cover for financial investigation. Is that legal? It's ethically questionable, but probably not illegal, Jennifer replied. They're allowed to gather information about marital assets, but they're supposed to do it through formal discovery requests rather than surveillance. Marcus realized that Linda and her attorney were moving much faster than he had anticipated. While he had been focused on documenting her financial fraud, they had been working to maximize her claims on his assets. "Jennifer, I want to accelerate our timeline," Marcus said. "How quickly can we file the criminal charges?" "We can file tomorrow morning if you're ready," Jennifer replied. "I was hoping to have a few more days to prepare, but if they're already conducting surveillance, we need to act quickly." Marcus spent Wednesday evening preparing for what he knew would be the most difficult period of his life. Linda would not accept criminal charges quietly, and her attorney seemed willing to use any available tactic to defend her interests. But as Marcus reviewed the evidence they had compiled, he felt confident that justice would ultimately prevail. The bank records were clear, the security footage was damning, and Linda's recorded admissions would be difficult for any attorney to explain away. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, typical November weather in Seattle. Marcus met Jennifer Williams and Robert Chen at the King County Courthouse, where they would file both criminal fraud charges and civil asset recovery claims. "Are you ready for this?" Jennifer asked as they climbed the courthouse steps. Marcus thought about Linda's contempt for his intelligence, her systematic theft of his life savings, and her threats to destroy him if he sought justice. "I've been ready for this my entire marriage," Marcus replied. "I just didn't know it until now." The filing process took less than an hour, but Marcus understood that the real battle was just beginning. Linda would receive formal notification of both the criminal charges and the divorce petition by Friday afternoon, and her response would determine whether their conflict could be resolved through negotiation or would require a prolonged legal war. As they left the courthouse, Robert Chen outlined what Marcus could expect over the next few weeks. "Linda's attorney will probably file for an emergency hearing to contest the criminal charges," Chen explained. "They'll argue that this is a domestic dispute rather than criminal fraud, and they'll try to portray you as a vindictive husband using the legal system for revenge." "How do we counter that argument?" "With evidence," Chen replied simply. "The bank records speak for themselves. Forgery is forgery, regardless of whether it's committed by a spouse or a stranger." Marcus drove home through Seattle's afternoon traffic, past the familiar landmarks of a life that was ending and a future that remained uncertain. Tomorrow, Linda would discover that her access to his money was permanently severed and that her years of financial fraud had finally caught up with her. Friday afternoon brought the phone call Marcus had been expecting. Linda's voice was high and strained, barely controlled panic evident in every word. "Marcus, what have you done?" she demanded. "I just received papers saying you're filing criminal charges against me. This is insane." "Linda, everything in those papers is true," Marcus replied calmly. "You committed financial fraud, and I'm holding you accountable for it." "This will destroy my business," Linda said, her voice breaking. "No client will work with a designer who has been charged with financial crimes." "You should have considered that before you started forging my signature," Marcus replied. "Marcus, please," Linda said, her tone shifting to desperate pleading. "We can work this out privately. I'll pay back everything I spent. I'll get a regular job and contribute to household expenses. Just drop the criminal charges." "Linda, you spent over $100,000 of my money on a business that doesn't exist," Marcus said. "Marcus, please," Linda said, her tone shifting to desperate pleading. "We can work this out privately. I'll pay back everything I spent. I'll get a regular job and contribute to household expenses. Just drop the criminal charges." "Linda, you spent over $100,000 of my money on a business that doesn't exist."
Even if you got a job paying $50,000 a year, it would take you decades to repay what you stole. "Then what do you want from me?" Linda asked, her voice now completely broken. Marcus thought about her question carefully. What did he want? Justice, certainly. Protection from future fraud, absolutely. But beyond that, he wanted something Linda had never given him in 20 years of marriage. "I want you to tell the truth," Marcus said finally. "I want you to admit what you've done and accept responsibility for the consequences." The line was quiet for a long moment. When Linda spoke again, her voice had changed completely. "Marcus, you're going to regret this," she said, her tone cold and threatening. "I know things about you that could destroy your business and your reputation. If you want to play hardball, I can play harder than you can imagine." "Linda, this conversation is being recorded," Marcus said. "Threatening someone who has filed criminal charges against you could constitute witness intimidation." "Record this," Linda replied. "By the time I'm finished with you, you'll wish you had never been born." The line went dead, leaving Marcus sitting in his kitchen with the echoes of 20 years of marriage reduced to mutual threats and legal maneuvering. But as he reviewed the evidence files spread across his kitchen table, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: complete control over his own financial future, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice was finally within reach. Linda had called him too stupid to understand money. Tomorrow, she would discover just how intelligent a supposedly stupid man could be when he was properly motivated and adequately prepared. Marcus woke on Saturday morning to the sound of someone pounding on his front door. The digital clock beside his bed showed 5:47 in the morning, far too early for any reasonable visitor. Through the bedroom window, he could see Linda's rental car parked askew in his driveway, the driver's door left open as if she had abandoned it in haste. The pounding continued, accompanied by Linda's voice calling his name with increasing desperation. Marcus pulled on a robe and made his way to the front door, his phone already recording audio in case Linda made additional incriminating statements. Through the security peephole, Marcus could see his wife of 20 years looking completely disheveled. Her hair was uncombed, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing the same clothes she had worn to their confrontational meeting at the mall 3 days earlier. "Marcus, open this door right now," Linda shouted. "We need to talk before you destroy both our lives." Marcus opened the door, but left the security chain engaged, creating a gap wide enough for conversation, but preventing Linda from entering his house. "Linda, it's not even 6 in the morning," Marcus said calmly. "What's so urgent that it couldn't wait for normal business hours?" "Patterson says the criminal charges could result in federal prosecution," Linda said, her words tumbling over each other in obvious panic. "Federal charges, Marcus, that means prison time, not just fines or probation." Marcus studied his wife's appearance more carefully. Her hands were shaking, her eyes were bloodshot, and she exhibited the manic energy of someone who had not slept in days. This was not the composed, manipulative woman who had been stealing from him for years. This was someone experiencing the psychological collapse that often accompanied exposure of long-term criminal behavior. "Linda, the charges are what they are," Marcus said. "You committed financial fraud. The consequences are determined by the legal system, not by me." "But you could drop the charges," Linda insisted. "You could call the prosecutor's office and tell them you want to handle this as a civil matter instead of criminal prosecution." "Why would I do that?" Marcus asked. Linda's composure cracked completely, and she began sobbing with the raw emotion of someone who had exhausted all other options. "Because I'm your wife, Marcus. Because we loved each other once. Because 20 years of marriage has to count for something." Marcus felt a mixture of sadness and anger as he watched Linda's breakdown. The woman who had spent years condescending to him about his supposed intellectual limitations was now begging for mercy based on emotions and relationships she had systematically undermined through her criminal behavior. "Linda, you called me too stupid to understand money," Marcus said quietly. "You stole my retirement savings and gambled it away on a fake business. You forged my signature and lied to my face for years.
What exactly am I supposed to be nostalgic about? I never meant to hurt you, Linda said through her tears. Everything I did was supposed to benefit both of us. I was trying to build something bigger than your little workshop business. By stealing from me? Marcus clarified. Linda, you didn't build anything. You destroyed everything we had over 20 years of marriage. Linda's emotional breakdown suddenly shifted into angry desperation. Fine, she said, wiping her eyes and staring directly at Marcus through the narrow gap in the doorway. If you want to play hardball, I can destroy you too. Is that a threat? Marcus asked, making sure his phone continued recording their conversation. It's a promise, Linda replied, her voice now cold and calculating. I know about the unreported cash payments from your clients. I know about the business materials you used for personal projects. I know about the time you falsified a workers' compensation claim when you hurt your back. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The workers' compensation claim had been 15 years ago, and the falsification had been minor, claiming an injury was work-related when it had actually happened at home. But Linda was right that it could cause problems if scrutinized by investigators. Linda, if you have evidence of wrongdoing, you should report it to the appropriate authorities, Marcus said, echoing the advice Jennifer Williams had given him. But using threats to discourage someone from cooperating with criminal prosecution could constitute obstruction of justice. I'm not threatening anyone, Linda replied with a brittle smile. I'm simply explaining that divorce proceedings often reveal information that both parties might prefer to keep private. Marcus recognized the exact phrasing David Patterson had used during their phone conversation earlier in the week. Linda's attorney had coached her to make these threats in a way that provided legal deniability while still delivering the intended intimidation. Linda, I want you to leave my property, Marcus said firmly. Any future communication needs to go through our attorneys. This is still half my house, Linda replied. Community property law gives me rights that you can't just ignore. Actually, the house title is in my name only. I bought it before we were married, and I never added your name to the deed. You have no legal right to be here. Linda's face went white as she processed this information. In her desperation to access his financial resources, she had apparently overlooked the fact that their most valuable asset was not actually marital property. That can't be right, Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. I've been living here for 20 years. I have to have some legal claim.
You had a legal claim as long as we were married, Marcus replied, but I filed for divorce Thursday morning. Your residency rights ended when you moved out voluntarily. Marcus closed the door and engaged all the security locks, leaving Linda standing on his front porch in the early morning darkness. Through the window, he watched her return to her rental car and sit in the driver's seat for several minutes, apparently making phone calls. When Linda finally drove away, Marcus called Jennifer Williams' emergency number. The attorney answered on the second ring, sounding alert despite the early hour. Marcus, what's the situation? Jennifer asked immediately. Marcus described Linda's visit, her emotional breakdown, and her escalating threats about his business practices. Jennifer listened without interruption, taking notes that Marcus could hear being typed on her computer. This is exactly what we expected, Jennifer said when Marcus finished his report. Linda is realizing that her criminal behavior has serious consequences, and she's trying every available tactic to avoid accountability. How concerned should I be about her threats regarding my business? Marcus asked. We'll address those issues proactively, Jennifer replied. Robert Chen is already preparing voluntary disclosure documents for any questionable business practices. By Monday morning, we'll have filed comprehensive reports with both state and federal tax authorities, along with payment for any back taxes or penalties that might be owed. Jennifer explained that voluntary disclosure would neutralize Linda's ability to use tax issues as leverage while demonstrating Marcus's good faith cooperation with authorities. The financial cost would be minimal compared to the legal protection it provided. What about the workers' compensation claim she mentioned? Marcus asked. We'll disclose that too, Jennifer said immediately.
15-year-old minor fraud is much less serious than current major financial crimes. The key is getting ahead of any accusations Linda might make. Marcus spent Saturday morning reviewing his business records and preparing documentation for the voluntary disclosure process. By noon, he had identified every questionable transaction or business practice from the past decade, creating a comprehensive file that demonstrated both his honesty and his commitment to legal compliance. The afternoon brought a phone call from Robert Chen, who had been working through the weekend to accelerate the criminal prosecution timeline. "Marcus, I have some interesting news," Chen said. "The prosecutor's office has reviewed the evidence we submitted, and they're very interested in your case. Apparently, they've been seeing an increase in spousal financial fraud cases, and yours is one of the most well-documented they've encountered." "What does that mean practically?" Marcus asked. "It means they're treating this as a priority case," Chen replied. "They want to use your evidence to establish precedents for prosecuting financial fraud between spouses. Linda's attorney may discover that plea bargaining is more difficult than they anticipated." Chen explained that the prosecutor intended to file federal charges in addition to the state charges Marcus had already initiated. Federal involvement would make the case much more serious, with potentially significant prison time if Linda was convicted. "How long before Linda finds out about the federal charges?" Marcus asked. "She'll be notified Monday morning," Chen replied. "I expect her attorney to request an emergency meeting to discuss plea negotiations." Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension as he considered the implications of federal prosecution. Linda had spent years treating his money as her personal expense account, showing contempt for both his intelligence and her financial security. Federal criminal charges would force her to confront the reality that her behavior had been not just morally wrong, but seriously illegal. Sunday evening brought unexpected visitors to Marcus's house. Through the front window, he could see two women standing on his porch, both appearing nervous and uncertain. When Marcus opened the door, he recognized one of them as Rebecca, Linda's sister, though he hadn't seen her in several months. "Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you," Rebecca said, "but Linda is staying with me, and I need to understand what's happening with these criminal charges." The second woman introduced herself as Janet Morrison, Linda's business partner in several of her design projects. Marcus invited both women into his living room, curious about their perspective on Linda's financial behavior. "Rebecca, how much do you know about Linda's business activities?" Marcus asked. "I know she's been working very hard to establish herself as a high-end interior designer," Rebecca replied. "She's always talking about potential projects and networking opportunities." "Has she ever asked you for money?" Marcus asked. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Janet Morrison before answering. "She borrowed $15,000 from me last year to fund what she called a startup investment for her design business." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Did she pay you back?" "She said the business hadn't generated enough profit yet," Rebecca replied, "but she promised to repay me with interest once her current projects were completed." Marcus turned to Janet Morrison. "What about you? Have you invested money in Linda's business?" $22,000, Janet replied quietly. "Linda said she needed capital to purchase high-end furnishings for client projects. She showed me contracts and business plans that looked very professional." Marcus realized that Linda's fraud extended far beyond stealing from him. She had been operating what amounted to an investment scam, collecting money from multiple victims to fund a lifestyle she presented as business success. "Janet, do you have copies of the business plans Linda showed you?" "I have everything," Janet replied, opening a folder she had brought with her. "Contracts, financial projections, client testimonials, marketing materials." Marcus reviewed Janet's documents with growing amazement. Linda had created an elaborate fictional business empire, complete with fake client contracts, fabricated testimonials, and financial projections that bore no relationship to reality. The level of deception was far more sophisticated than Marcus had realized. "Rebecca, Janet, I think you need to understand something," Marcus said carefully. "Linda has been charged with financial fraud for stealing over $100,000 from our joint accounts. The business you've been investing in appears to be largely fictional." Both women stared at Marcus in shocked silence. Rebecca was the first to speak. "That's impossible," she said. "Linda has been working constantly on her design projects. She's always at client meetings or property consultations." "Have you ever met any of her clients? Have you seen any of the properties she claims to be designing?" The question hung in the air as both women realized they had no direct evidence of Linda's business success beyond her own claims and the professional-looking documents she had provided. "She showed me photographs of completed projects," Janet said uncertainly. "Beautiful rooms with expensive furnishings." Marcus pulled up a reverse image search on his phone and asked Janet to describe some of the photographs. Within minutes, they had discovered that Linda's portfolio images were stolen from high-end design magazines and luxury hotel websites. "She's been lying about everything," Rebecca whispered. "The business, the clients, the income potential."
Rebecca, Janet, I think you need to consider filing your own fraud complaints, Marcus said. What Linda did to you is the same thing she did to me, just on a smaller scale. The two women left Marcus's house that evening with copies of his evidence files and contact information for Robert Chang. By Monday morning, the criminal case against Linda would include additional fraud victims and evidence of a systematic pattern of investment scamming. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction as he realized that Linda's web of deception was unraveling beyond anything he had initiated. Her victims were discovering each other, comparing notes, and recognizing the extent of her criminal behavior. Monday morning brought a flurry of legal activity. Robert Chang called at 8:30 to report that federal prosecutors had filed additional charges based on the evidence provided by Rebecca and Janet Morrison. Linda is now facing federal wire fraud charges in addition to the state financial fraud charges, Chang explained. Wire fraud carries a potential sentence of 20 years in prison. Her attorney is going to be very motivated to negotiate a plea agreement. Jennifer Williams called an hour later with updates on the divorce proceedings. David Patterson filed an emergency motion claiming that your criminal charges are an abusive process designed to gain advantage in property division. The judge scheduled a hearing for Thursday afternoon. "What does that mean for the criminal case?" Marcus asked. "Nothing," Jennifer replied. "Criminal charges and divorce proceedings are separate legal matters. Patterson is trying to create confusion, but it won't affect the prosecution." The most interesting call came from Detective Sarah Chen, the financial crimes investigator assigned to Linda's case. Detective Chen wanted to interview Marcus about the pattern of Linda's fraudulent behavior and the timeline of his discoveries. "Mr. Chen, your documentation is some of the best I've seen in a financial fraud case," Detective Chen said when she arrived at Marcus's house that afternoon. "Most victims don't recognize the systematic nature of spousal financial abuse until after significant damage has been done." Marcus described his gradual realization that Linda's business expenses were actually personal spending disguised as professional investments. Detective Chen took detailed notes, focusing particularly on Linda's psychological manipulation tactics. Financial abusers often use intellectual intimidation to discourage their victims from questioning financial decisions, Detective Chen explained. "Your wife's comments about your supposed inability to understand modern financial strategies are classic examples of this manipulation." "I believed her," Marcus admitted. "For years, I assumed she was more qualified to handle complex financial decisions." "That's exactly how this type of fraud works," Detective Chen replied. "The victim's trust and deference to supposed expertise become weapons used against them." Detective Chen explained that Linda's case would probably become a training example for other financial crimes investigators, demonstrating how domestic financial abuse could escalate into large-scale fraud affecting multiple victims. "What happens next?" Marcus asked. "Your wife's attorney will probably approach the prosecutor about a plea agreement within the next few days. Federal wire fraud charges are serious enough that most defendants prefer to negotiate rather than risk a trial." Tuesday brought the news Marcus had been anticipating. David Patterson called Jennifer Williams to request a meeting about potential plea negotiations for both the criminal charges and the divorce settlement. "They want to package everything together," Jennifer explained to Marcus during their phone conversation. "Linda pleads guilty to reduced charges, accepts responsibility for the financial fraud, and agrees to a divorce settlement that minimizes her claims on your assets." "What would I get out of that arrangement?" Marcus asked. "Guaranteed restitution, faster resolution of both the criminal and the civil cases, and certainty about the outcome," Jennifer replied. "The alternative is months of litigation with uncertain results." Marcus considered the trade-offs involved in accepting a plea agreement. Part of him wanted Linda to face the full consequences of her criminal behavior, including the possibility of significant prison time. But another part of him recognized the value of achieving a definitive resolution that would allow him to rebuild his financial life. "What kind of restitution are we talking about?" Marcus asked. Patterson suggests that Linda could liquidate her remaining assets and arrange a payment plan for the balance. She's also willing to sign documents releasing any claims to your house, business, or retirement accounts. Marcus scheduled a meeting for Wednesday afternoon to review the proposed plea agreement in detail. The terms would determine whether his long struggle for justice ended with negotiated resolution or continued through months of additional litigation. Wednesday afternoon found Marcus, Jennifer Williams, and Robert Chen sitting across a conference table from Linda, David Patterson, and a federal prosecutor named Elizabeth Harper. The atmosphere was tense but professional, the kind of meeting where 20 years of marriage would be reduced to financial calculations and legal technicalities. Linda looked dramatically different from the desperate woman who had pounded on Marcus's door 4 days earlier. She was professionally dressed, composed, and appeared to have recovered her emotional equilibrium. But Marcus noticed that she avoided making eye contact with him throughout the meeting. "My client is prepared to accept responsibility for financial irregularities in her business activities," Patterson began, "in exchange for reduced charges and a reasonable restitution agreement." "Financial irregularities," Robert Chen repeated. "Mr. Patterson, your client committed systematic financial fraud affecting multiple victims over a period of several years." Federal prosecutor Elizabeth Harper laid out the government's position with clinical precision. Mrs. Chen faces federal wire fraud charges, carrying a potential sentence of 20 years in prison. The evidence supporting these charges include bank records, security footage, recorded admissions, and testimony from multiple fraud victims. Marcus watched Linda's face as Harper detailed the evidence against her. For the first time since this ordeal had begun, Linda appeared to fully understand the seriousness of her legal situation. "What is the government's offer?" Patterson asked. "Mrs. Chen pleads guilty to 1 count of federal wire fraud and 1 count of state financial fraud," Harper replied. "She receives a sentence of 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. She agrees to pay full restitution to all identified victims, with the payment schedules supervised by the court." Linda spoke for the first time during the meeting. "What about the divorce settlement?" Jennifer Williams opened a folder of documents. "You release all claims to Mr. Chen's house, business assets, and retirement accounts. You accept responsibility for all debts incurred through your fraudulent activities. In exchange, Mr. Chen agrees not to pursue civil damages beyond the restitution amount specified in the criminal case." Marcus studied the proposed agreement, calculating the financial and emotional costs of continued litigation versus negotiated resolution. The plea agreement would guarantee restitution payments and permanently sever Linda's legal claims to his assets. More importantly, it would allow him to focus on rebuilding his life rather than spending years in courtrooms. "I want to add one condition," Marcus said. "Linda makes a public statement acknowledging her financial fraud and apologizing to the victims she deceived." Patterson started to object, but Linda interrupted him. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "Marcus, I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to understand that I never intended for things to go this far. Linda, you called me too stupid to understand money. You spent years stealing from me while treating me like I was intellectually inferior. Your intentions don't change what you did." Linda's composure cracked slightly. I know I destroyed everything." The plea agreement was finalized after another hour of negotiations over restitution schedules and asset liquidation timelines. Linda would serve 18 months in federal prison, pay back over $150,000 to her various victims, and permanently relinquish any legal claims to Marcus's property or business. As the meeting concluded, Linda approached Marcus while the attorneys gathered their documents. "Marcus, I want you to know that I loved you," she said, her voice barely audible. "I know I have a terrible way of showing it, but everything I did was supposed to make our lives better.
Marcus looked at his wife of 20 years, seeing not the criminal who had stolen his retirement savings, but the woman he had once believed he would spend his life with. "Linda, if you had loved me, you would have respected me enough to tell me the truth about our finances," Marcus replied. "Love doesn't include theft and deception." Linda nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I hope someday you can find someone who deserves you." Marcus left the federal building that evening with legal documents that officially ended both his marriage and his financial exploitation. The 18-month prison sentence seemed appropriate given the scope of Linda's crimes, and the restitution agreement would eventually restore most of his stolen savings. But more importantly, Marcus had discovered something about himself that Linda's psychological manipulation had hidden for decades. He was not too stupid to understand money or any other complex subject. He was intelligent, capable, and deserving of respect from the people in his life. The months following Linda's sentencing passed more peacefully than Marcus had experienced in years. Without the constant background stress of financial uncertainty and psychological manipulation, he found himself enjoying aspects of life he had forgotten were pleasurable. His cabinet-making business expanded as word spread about his custom work and reliability. Clients appreciated his attention to detail and his straightforward communication style, qualities that Linda had always dismissed as unsophisticated. Marcus used the time during Linda's incarceration to travel, something he had always wanted to do, but Linda had always found reasons to postpone. He visited his brother in Colorado, explored national parks in Utah, and took a woodworking workshop in Vermont where he learned traditional techniques that enhanced his modern designs. The house felt different without Linda's constant criticism and financial anxiety. Marcus redecorated gradually, choosing furniture and artwork that reflected his own preferences rather than Linda's ideas about what constituted sophisticated taste. Most surprisingly, Marcus discovered that he enjoyed managing his own finances. Working with a fee-only financial advisor, he developed investment strategies and retirement planning that made sense to him. The condescending voice in his head that had always whispered about his supposed intellectual limitations gradually faded as he proved to himself that he could handle complex decisions competently. Restitution payments arrived monthly from Linda's prison earnings and the liquidation of her remaining assets. Marcus deposited each payment into a separate savings account, watching his financial security slowly rebuild. By the time Linda was scheduled for release, he would have recovered most of what she had stolen. Rebecca and Janet Morrison both thanked Marcus for encouraging them to file their own fraud complaints. Rebecca eventually recovered $12,000 of the $15,000 Linda had borrowed from her, while Janet's recovery was more substantial because her losses had been documented more thoroughly. "You probably saved us from losing even more money," Janet told Marcus during a chance encounter at a Seattle farmer's market. "Linda was already asking me to invest in her next big project when the criminal charges were filed." As Linda's release date approached, Marcus found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned about trust, respect, and self-worth. The woman who had called him too stupid to understand money had ultimately been outsmarted by the supposedly simple cabinet maker she had spent years deceiving. Marcus received a letter from Linda 2 weeks before her scheduled release. The handwriting was familiar, but the tone was different from any communication he had ever received from her. "Marcus, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm not writing to seek sympathy or reconciliation. I wanted you to know that my time in prison has given me perspective on how badly I damaged both our lives. I convinced myself that my business dreams justified any means of funding them, but I understand now that I was stealing from someone who trusted me completely. You deserved a partner who respected your intelligence and your contributions to our marriage. I failed you in every way that mattered. I hope you found happiness and peace without me. You certainly deserve both. I won't contact you again after this letter, but I wanted you to know that I understand the extent of my betrayal and I'm truly sorry. Linda." Marcus read the letter twice, then filed it with the other legal documents from their divorce. Linda's apology felt genuine, but it didn't change the fundamental facts of what she had done or the years of psychological manipulation she had used to facilitate her crimes. The day Linda was released from federal prison, Marcus was working in his shop on a custom dining table for a client in Bellevue. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was creating something beautiful and permanent while his former wife was beginning the process of rebuilding a life she had destroyed through greed and deception. Marcus never saw Linda again after her release. He heard occasionally through Rebecca that Linda had found work as a sales clerk at a furniture store and was living in a small apartment while completing her supervised probation. The woman who had once spent thousands of dollars on business lunches was apparently learning to live within the constraints of an hourly wage. 2 years after Linda's conviction, Marcus met Sarah at a woodworking class taught by a master craftsman who specialized in traditional Japanese joinery techniques. Sarah was a retired nurse who had always wanted to learn furniture making, and she appreciated both Marcus's skill and his patient teaching style. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared interests, rather than financial convenience or psychological manipulation. Sarah had managed her own finances successfully throughout her nursing career, and she never questioned Marcus's intelligence or competence in any area of life. "I can't imagine being married to someone who treated me like I was stupid," Sarah said one evening as Marcus described his previous marriage. "Partnerships should make both people feel stronger and more capable, not diminished." Marcus realized that Sarah's perspective represented everything that had been missing from his marriage to Linda: respect, encouragement, and genuine partnership rather than financial exploitation disguised as sophistication. On a clear Saturday morning in March, exactly 3 years after Linda's conviction, Marcus received a final restitution payment that brought his total recovery to 97% of his documented losses. The money represented more than financial restitution. It was proof that justice had ultimately prevailed over manipulation and deception. Marcus deposited the check into his retirement account, which had grown substantially through careful management and consistent contributions from his expanding business. At 67, he had more financial security than he had ever enjoyed during his marriage, plus the satisfaction of knowing that he had achieved it through his own intelligence and hard work. That evening, Marcus called Jennifer Williams to thank her for her legal representation and to report that the restitution process was complete. "Marcus, your case has become something of a legend in our office," Jennifer said. "It's rare to see financial fraud victims who document evidence so thoroughly and pursue justice so systematically." "I had excellent legal representation," Marcus replied, "and I was motivated by 20 years of being told I was too stupid to understand my own financial situation." "How do you feel now that it's all over?" Jennifer asked. Marcus thought about the question as he looked around his workshop, filled with custom projects that reflected both his skill and his business acumen. Through the windows, he could see the house he owned free and clear, the home where he lived peacefully without constant financial anxiety or psychological manipulation. "I feel intelligent," Marcus said finally. "For the first time in 20 years, I feel like I'm exactly as smart as I actually am." Jennifer laughed. "That's probably the best possible outcome for any legal case." Marcus hung up the phone and returned to his current project, a custom bookcase for Sarah's home office. The piece required complex calculations and precise joinery, skills that demonstrated the same analytical thinking Linda had always claimed he lacked. As Marcus adjusted his router settings and planned the intricate details of the bookcase construction, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from financial victim to empowered survivor. Linda had called him too stupid to handle money, but in the end, he had handled her right out of his life and his finances. The workshop was quiet, except for the familiar sounds of precision woodworking, the same sounds that had provided Marcus with peace and purpose throughout the chaos of discovery, prosecution, and recovery. Tomorrow, he would begin a new custom project, using skills and intelligence that no one would ever again question or diminish. The late afternoon sun slanted through the workshop windows, illuminating dust motes and wood shavings that danced in the golden light. Marcus smiled as he worked, finally understanding that true wealth wasn't measured in bank balances or business success, but in the peace that came from living with honesty, integrity, and genuine self-respect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.